Welcome to today's webinar on sustainable HR, a new era in HR delivery, brought to you by Informa Connect Academy. My name is Mai Fuad, and I am your host for today's webinar. In this webinar, we will explore the concept of sustainable HR and its importance for organizations. We will discuss how HR can sustain itself to meet the changing requirements of organizations, the global economy, the environment, and the wider social world. With the world of work undergoing significant changes, including remote work, work-life balance, pressures, and evolving regulations, HR needs to adapt and to thrive. We are also excited to introduce our new certificate of sustainable HR that will change your mental model on the role of HR to provide and provide you with the skills and knowledge to succeed in the new world. Our distinguished speaker for today is Mr. Tom Raftery, a seasoned expert in HR strategy and processes with over 40 years of international experience. Tom holds a PA and an MPA and is a member of SHRM and CIPD. So, without any further ado, let's welcome Mr. Tom Raftery to this webinar. Mr. Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you, May. Thank you. Good morning for some of you and good afternoon for others, depending on where you're living. Welcome, and I'm really pleased to be here. And thank you to Informa for allowing me to make this presentation. I think let me start first of all by going in a little bit more detail. I've been a long time in HR. I've seen lots of comings and goings. I've seen times when actually I haven't been very happy in HR, if you want my honest opinion. The reason I took an MBA was to get out of it. I ended up working for one of the big consulting companies, Anderson, and moved on more strategic work, but it came back to HR. Why? Because I'm very much a people person, as most of you are. You're in it because hopefully you like people and you like working with them and you enjoy that background. I think that's still there, but I think the world of work has changed. I've had a lot of experience. I've worked in the region. I've worked for multinationals. I've worked for local family businesses. I worked for consulting companies from Anderson to Watson Wyatt to even Merck in the old days. They're very strong in the 80s. I actually first came to the Middle East in 1979. That's showing my age. I was a young lad, if it's any consolation. And so, yeah, I've seen the changes. I've seen how things have improved in the region and globally. So I've worked in Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. So I've seen HR change quite dramatically. And I think certainly over the last couple of years, there's been some fundamental changes globally in a lot of institutions in the world economy and some things that May talked about that really has made me realize that HR needs to be looking at things differently. So I'm going to take you through, when we talk about sustainable HR, I want to take you through on a little journey and I'll explain what we mean by that. And then I'll go into outline this new certificate that we've developed. I've worked with Brad Boyson, who is ex-SHRM as well, of what we put together on that as a great learning experience for all. Because I think HR needs to change. Or something I'll be saying through the next hour is you need to change your mental model and how you look at what HR does and what it contributes to organizations, to people, and to communities. So let me take you on a bit of a journey. What is sustainability? And this is taken from the Brundtland report for the World Commission on Environment and Development called Our Common Future. And what they talk about is the practice of meeting the needs. And everyone thinks this is in the context of environment. It's not just that. It's meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, when you look at HR and what we do with people, that resonates very, very loud. And I think the big change that's coming across is that HR needs to move away from the reactive mode and become more proactive, more longer term in looking at resources. And it's not just people, it's resources right across the business. It's about looking at your community, looking at the social welfare, the social environment, as well as the climate and all the actual environment that we're working with, you need to be aware of. So then what we think, the concept is about responsibility and effective use of our resources, of waste, preservation of ecosystem, natural resources for future generations. That calls all resources. So it's about people, it's about their skills, it's about their knowledge, it's about their well-being, it's about how well they work within an organization. We need to take a broader perspective of people rather than HR systems and approaches to improve performance and engagement and all the rest of it. So there's a lot more to take into consideration. And I think particularly because of COVID and the big change in the world of work, it's the biggest change I've seen in the world of work in my whole 40 years. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity for HR to take a grasp of this. They've done a great job so far in dealing with COVID. In fact, the credibility of HR, I believe, is increased dramatically because of the way all of you work very hard to change the way people work to cope with, obviously, the huge lockdowns and challenges that COVID gave. So we're going to be building on this. So sustainable HR, what is that? And somebody say, well, this is about climate change. Is it about environment, etc.? It is, and it's a lot more than that. You know, HR calls, what you need is the principles of sustainability over time. So meeting the needs of the present. So doing what stakeholders need to be done now and doing well. And it's not just the owners, it's not the investors and all that, it's all stakeholders, from community, from people, from associations and everything else. So it's taking that broader perspective that maybe HR has been taken in the past. Again, that definition, meeting the needs of the present, without compromising the ability of future generations. So this is about anticipating and adapting to new needs and new stakeholders, broader stakeholders. Things are changing so quickly. We need to be ahead of the game. I always used to say, in my years of HR, I just said, what's coming around the corner? What do we need to be ready for? What do we need? And then what do we need to be putting in place? So this is about being far more proactive and looking far more globally, not just within your organization and its challenges, but within your community, within your society, within the economy, within the government, within the environment, everything. So you've got to take that broader perspective. So this, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is mindful of outcomes, not just activities. It's about doing things. What do we want to do? We want to grow people. We want to develop them. We want them to contribute more. We want them to be engaged. We want to look after their social well-being. We want to support the community and the economy and everything else. So HR is a service provider, but it's got to be focused on outcomes. What do you want to achieve? We love doing stuff in HR. And you think, why are you doing it? I've done a lot of work as a consultant restructuring HR departments. I said, what's the added value of what you're doing? And I think by looking at that and saying, what do you want to achieve? What's your outcomes? Not focus on the activities. So this is where sustainability and what we need to be doing for the long term comes to play. Now, there was some recent research by Deloitte on looking at the readiness, what they call the readiness gap for sustainability. And they said organizations understand the impact of sustainability in their organization and the ownership for driving progress and outcomes, etc. So, yeah, so people understand that. But the reality, when they ask organizations, are they ready to understand the impacts of sustainability in the organization and how they define the outcomes and how they deliver ownership and all that? Unfortunately, it's very low. That's a big gap that we've got to start to, and we've got to do it a lot more quickly, because everyone is now looking at sustainability and in terms of its impact. So, if we look at this sustainability, the first one, positioning HR using the lens of sustainability. So, for example, the environmental governance and social aspect they're all aware of. That is there, that's been around for a while. There's also the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In my last corporate role, a lot of things that we were measured against was measured against the criteria of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Are you there? Are you ready for that? So these are global institutions that organizations, big ones, small ones, are expected to live up to and to deliver to these sort of guidelines, regulations, and things like this. So you've got to be ready for that. Then the next one is positioning HR within the lens of systems. And as we all know, the IFRS sustainability regulations are coming out, starting, I believe, in January 25. There are other regulations that relate, not just related to finance, related to corporate governance, related to environment, operations, and things like that. So there's a lot more, and we'll cover some of these when you get into the program. So are you aware of these? Are you up to speed? Do you know what HR needs to be doing to delivering for that? And then finally, position HR through the lens of system, the ESG, the social responsibility. And this is ISO 30414 is becoming a lot more structured. I remember ISO 20 years ago, I went through the early stages, but it's a lot more structured now in making sure that people are aware of what ESG will do, and incorporating a lot of global metrics. Now, we all know about metrics and how that evolves and what we need to be using. I think we need to fundamentally look different at how we use our metrics in the future. Not metrics to measure what we do, but metrics to measure the outcomes, what we want to achieve. By the way, if you've got any questions along the line, please leave a message in the chat. Someone will highlight it. This might be different to what you were expecting. And one of the things I'll also mention is the mental model we have of HR. We assume HR is performance management, grade structures, appraisals, learning and development. It's far more broader than that. We need to be taking that broader perspective and look at all the various institutions and measures and targets and systems that we need to be ensuring that we have in place. Now, I'd like to show you a video just to give you setting the scene in terms of understanding some of the changes that we're facing. We're just going to play the video. This is from YouTube, and I think it's very enlightening. I'd like you to reflect on this video. It's going to take 2 or 3 minutes, but can we play the video, please?
There has never been a bigger force for change than technology. It changes absolutely everything about the way we live, the way we get around, the way we eat, even the way we talk to each other.
Okay. Thank you, mate. Okay. Reflections. Does anyone got any reflections on that? Any comments? Yeah. Few commented on the chat saying it's interesting. Someone said it's very long. It is long because there's huge complexity there. There's a huge challenges. And just look at not just technology, look at population, look at the changes that's happening in the world, the movement of people globally, migration, immigration, things like that. So there's huge challenges. So sustainable HR is very much about saying, looking at all the things that we're facing and huge, very, very vast changes that are happening and happening quickly. How does HR become sustainable in making sure what it delivers is what's required by the various stakeholders, not just the shareholders, not just the owners, but the community, the people, the social environment, the economy, the country, etc., etc. So they're the things that we need to be looking at. So let's just go back to the to the slides. Everyone can see the slides. Yeah, just I want to make sure everyone's
Yes,
seen.
we can see.
Okay,
We can see the
good.
slides.
Okay, so let's move on. I think I want to give you a quote here. Larry Fink was the chairman and CEO of BlackRock, one of the world's largest investment organizations, and he did a CEO to his he did a letter to his CEOs, and look at what he said. Companies must ask themselves, what role do we play in the community? How do we manage the impact on the environment? How do we create a diverse workforce? How do we adapt to technological change? How do we retrain and what opportunities for our employees and our business? How do we match those? In an automated world, what are we doing to make sure people are set up for that? And then looking at the use of behavioral finance and other tools to prepare workers for retirement. We need to be looking sustainable is not just how we attract people, but how we work them to the point of when they leave and even when they retire. What support do we give them there? You might say that's not our problem. The world is changing. The social world is changing. And it's more. We're taking more of a long-term view on the sustainability of what we do as HR, as people, as functions. So, and it was interesting. There was an article in one of the business papers at the weekend talking about another big investment company really taking Amazon to challenge over how they're using AI to impact the way they're influencing customers and employees. And went on to say they weren't happy with the way they weren't allowing them to have trade unions. Now, in many of the countries listening here, you don't want trade unions. Yeah, trade unions have a role to play. And, many investment companies recognize that. So there's a lot more change. A lot of these investment houses who own big shares in some of these companies are really starting to stand up and pressurize these companies. And as HR, you need to be aware of these. And this is where HR can move into leadership, in my view. So some of the challenges, I think there's a shift of power from workers and managers to owners, very much like that. And you're saying, hang on a minute, is it too much about shareholders and investors? There's a big gig economy. So the employer-employee relationship has changed. People now have 3 or 4 different jobs, working from home, which changed the whole work environment. There's been a big emphasis on metrics, on outputs and efficiency, but what about quality? I've seen a lot. I'm a big fan of metrics, but I've seen a lot of it being misused. And then there's a whole aspect of mergers and acquisitions and the greater cross-cutting and control. And this will have a detriment on sustainable decision making. And this is where CEOs, senior management, investment companies are starting to look, is this the right thing to do? And as HR, we should be in those discussions with senior management, external organizations. We should be leading the way. This is where I believe HR can show leadership. And looking back 40 years, it's a great time to be in HR if you want to show that leadership. But it's about growing a backbone and understanding the dynamics, understanding the challenges, and giving some answers to that in terms of being sustainable. And using that word is very powerful. So change is happening, increasing regulations, that we talked about. There is the gig economy. I've just repeated this twice. Sorry about that. What I'm doing is that with all of these, there's conflicting priorities. So how do you work from performance metrics when you don't, many people you don't actually employ? So you change the whole work environment. So there's conflicting priorities and a shifting power, and that power is continually changing as we move along. So looking at the future, the focus is very much on long-term value creation, value capture, in terms of, and that's the way you've got to look at everything you do. What is the value of what you're doing? What is the value to the company, to the employees, to the community, to the environment, to our various regulations that we have to adhere to as well. And therefore, you're going to have multiple stakeholders. It's not just the owners, it's not just the shareholders. And you've got to think of that long term. We talked about a lot of the regulations now coming in. They're also going to be stakeholders. You're going to have to report on the sustainability goals, the ESG, the IFRS, other ISO, and more. So there's more regulation coming in to make sure you adhere to that. So you also got to look at outcomes in terms of social, environmental, as well as financial. And it's about looking internally as well as externally. Often in HR, and I've done many training courses with Informa, I present a case study, and often I see people immediately go from a HR perspective. Whoa, stop. Stop looking at everything through HR glasses. Look at externally from the CEO's glasses, or the commercial director's glasses, or the external community glasses, or the people's glasses. You need to take a broader perspective because business is changing. That video, although it was long, showed you how much change we're facing at the moment. So sustainable HRM, care for your employees, easily said. Yeah, we care for our employees. It's a bit like saying I love you and the check's in the post. Do you really mean it? And in HR, I think many of you do, but you often come across challenges from weak middle management, senior management who don't want to do the right thing, and that is a challenge. I've been in one or two situations like that, but that's got to be fundamentally how you position what HR is doing to show management and senior management the value of caring for employees, caring for the environment. The environment is not just climate change. The environment is what's the working arrangements that you have, what's the office, what's the factory layout, what's things like that. So it's very much long term. What are we doing? Right? Profitability is important there. Yes, we need that, but not at the expense of the way it has people working 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week, or whatever, continually. So part of that then is employee participation, discussion, communication, developing partnerships, working with other organizations. A lot of organizations now are going externally to seek some help and support, whether it's in development or whatever, opening up opportunities. For example, I was working for a company that restructured two of its businesses in the UK. We had to actually close them down because the business wasn't working very well. But we shared all that information with the employees, and we ended up 97% of those employees, when there was distribution outlets closed down, moved on to another job, another career, early retirement, whatever, and they were very happy. In fact, our employee engagement scores were the highest they've ever been. And it also helped other communities, right? People were able to have continuation of that. So this is the way we need to be thinking, not saying, well, that's your job, that's finished, masalama. There's too much of that, and we've got to stop that, and you've got to stop management doing that and think more about what's sustainable. We've got a lot of compliance to talk about beyond labour regulations. I talked about that. And then it's working with employees, involving them, communicating them. And obviously the final thing is show fairness and equity in everything that we do. Don't hide things, because employees will find out. And communication is a critical part of that. So how well are you doing against all of these? So sustainable that HR is delivering to the various stakeholders. It's a huge challenge, but you've got to think differently. So obviously the pillars of sustainability are typically what's about the environment, about the social, about the economic. All right, this is a standard thing. But in many ways, it's about people, it's about planet, it's about profit. And that's where the challenge is, because they're pulling in different directions. And often in HR, one of the functions that we've often got various challenges. How do we meet needs of revenue and profit when, they want to work people to work 70, 80, 90 hours a week? That challenges within that. That's where you've got to think out of the box in providing some solutions. And also, what are we doing? How is that impacting the environment, impacting the economy, impacting what we're doing, and particularly with technology now coming in very, very strongly, that fundamentally changes things as well. So there's a lot of change happening. Also, we're talking about sustainable HR and work. Now, in the past, work was very much about tasks and duties, right? That would produce goods and services, so jobs, professions, whatever. Sustainable work now is very much about conducting a manner that's socially responsible, friendly, environmentally friendly, and economically viable. Socially responsible, environmentally friendly, and economically viable. Look at that. Look, let me just tell you, go into your office. You're in your office now, maybe, or whatever. Have a look around. Walk around your office. What do you see? What do you hear? Do you see vibrance? Do you see happiness? Do you see an open plan, really engaging environment? Or do you see people at their desk with their head down and not doing anything? Or do you see people texting or whatever? It's creating that environment that's sustainable over time, right? And we've got a duty to sort of get people to work together and make what we're doing sustainable. Now things are going to change. So if the business changes, you've got to retrain people, upskill, reskill, do it, invest in it. You know, some people say, oh, well, let's get rid of them. Let's recruit people who can do the job. No, you're not being sustainable. What you're doing is throwing that piece of plastic into the ocean, metaphorically speaking. And none of us want to do that. So we should be taking this sustainable concept, which is very strong now on the environment and the way we work, and bringing that into the way we do things in HR. So we talked about some of the trends here, just going on from that video: flatter organizations, more distributed workforce. We have contractors, we have temporary workers, we have what called the gig economy we talked about, greater technology, which means we need more flexibility, move away from these 100-page policies and procedures, keep them light, keep them flexible, keep them fairly standard, you know. So it's common sense. So I always say to people, HR is about common sense, but sense is not common. And often we make things too complex. Populism is another thing, is in terms of a lot of what's happening globally, particularly with countries, with politics and things like that, and that's having a big impact on the way we treat people and our laws and everything else. And the demographics one, which again was highlighted in the video, the huge change that is happening and the huge movement of people globally now moving between countries, which is causing a big challenge as well. So again, what do we do around that? And here, I want to really focus on the mental models of HR. Peter Senge, if anyone's done any of his work, Peter Senge did some work on the learning organization. Fantastic book, fantastic guy. And he talked about various things. One of them was called mental models. And mental models is the way we look at the world and the way we view each other. And he said to improve communication, what you need to do is understand the mental model of the person you're communicating with. And by understanding that, then you can adapt your behavior to get the result that you want. And that result will reinforce of looking at things differently. So you look at HR from a function perspective. We've got to change that and look at it from a more global, broader perspective. And this is where HR needs to change. Now, are you ready for that change? Are you ready to take yourself out of your comfort zone? Because that's what you need to be doing if you want sustainable HR management. You've got to change your mental model of how you look at HR and how HR contributes to organizations, to people, to communities, to the environment, and everything else. Okay? So you need to shift. So look at everything differently. You need to change and look at it from the social, environmental, economic regulation, sustainability. Can we sustain our workforce? Have they got the knowledge, the skills and capabilities? Can they still continue to add value and be engaged within the organization? How we engage in those people. So you've got a broad range of stakeholders now to look at. And what are you doing? Reflect on that. How much of this are you doing now? And how much more do you need to do? Any questions on that? Because I'll talk about what we're building, the certificate. And there's a few Q&As there. Yeah. The world is moving very fast and we need to be prepared. Yes, it is. I've never seen it change so fast. And AI, It could hamper creativity, but it can also support creativity. And this is the huge challenge. You've got to get your head around AI. I mean, I've been trying to get my head around it. And yes, it is. But how do you do it in a way that enhances creativity, enhances engagement, enhances enjoyment, rather than endangering it? And there's a big discussion now whether AI will mean a lots of reduction in jobs, or it means people will do more engaging, more enhancing jobs for themselves. A big challenge, and you need to be on top of that because AI will impact productivity. So where are you in HR and involving that? That is a huge one. By the way, someone asked the questions, the link to YouTube. If you ask, we can give you the link to that. It's on YouTube. It is really an insightful one. And actually, that YouTube, show it to all your HR team. I think it's really important. Okay. So we're leading up here because we're working at Brad Boyson, who's ex-SHRM in the region, and myself have been working on a new certificate of sustainable HR. This is about giving you the knowledge and skills to be able to do this. Tom, it's great. You've said all this, but oh my God, where do I start? You're probably thinking, where do I start? Where do I go from here? So that's what the aim of this advanced certificate in sustainable HR is about. And it's very much, it's jumped ahead of me here. So the framework is very much starting at the core of performance. We've got to be looking at performance, but we've got to look at performance in terms of the three main areas: talent, rewards, and learning. But within that environment, we've got to be looking from HR about well-being. Well-being is a huge topic now globally, right? We've got to make sure we're delivering to that. We've got to show the leadership. So we have to be talking about sustainable HR with management, with your communities, with countries, with governments. You need to be showing that leadership in terms of what sustainable HR means for business, for people, for other stakeholders. And that means innovation. You're going to have to do things differently. Think out of the box. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about HR, I always like to think out of the box to solutions, right? Rather than following the textbook. Many of you, I'm sure, have been through some learning at the moment where you follow the textbooks, you follow the training program, and you've got to think out of that box because you're dealing with people, you're dealing with organizations, and it's not always that simple. And then the final one is legal, and the sort of various regulations, the UN Development Goals, ESG, ISO, etc., etc. These are things that you're not going to be measured against, so you've got to be set up and prepared for that. And make sure that that's adding value to what you're doing rather than using it as a sort of weight around your neck. You've got to be aware of that. So what the program is going to be involving is basically it's made up of 4 courses and 8 modules. So the courses are Certificate in Leadership and Wellbeing, for which you're going to cover sustainable HR leadership and how to achieve that, workforce relations and wellness. Then the Certificate of Talent is again another two modules, which are going to be talent, recruitment and retention, and then learning, design and development in that area. Again, we'll give you a different perspective from many of the things that you will see on other programs that you've seen regionally or globally. Then a certificate on performance and reward, obviously looking at analytics and navigation and performance, that whole aspect, and how all that then obviously linked into rewards, compensation and benefits. And finally, certificates in the fundamentals of innovation, looking at innovation, how we can do things different, how we can think out of the box, what sort of things that we can try. It's also about building confidence with you as a HR practitioner that you can do things differently. And one of the things I've found, I suppose, 40 years, I've still got some confidence. I've got a lot of confidence, but I've built on that by trying out things. Some things work, some things didn't work. But it's about trying those things and understanding and thinking differently. And I think one of the biggest things is I think out of the HR box. I look at everything, mental models again. I look at it from the business perspective, from the employee's perspective, from the community's perspective, from the environments, from just working well with people, caring for them and things like that. So you look at it at different perspectives. So that will help you with that. And then finally, legal principles and policy. So lots of things we're going to be talking about there that are the standard things that we need to make sure we get right, which good HR functions should have. But often that's tend to be forgotten. And we have a legal framework. And don't forget, we have labor employment laws. They're the minimum, right? Are you adhering to all your employment laws? Hopefully you are, but they're the absolute minimum. You should be doing more than that, right? That's what's expected. So we'll talk about some things like that. So it's going to be 4 courses and 8 modules, okay? And what we're going to be doing is linking these back to the UN strategic development goals. We'll pull out the key one there, and also the ISO standards. And we're going to be linking all this back into these goals and regulations that you've got to be adhering to. So it's going to be very much tied down to that, so that you're going to be ready and you can point to your senior manager, we're ahead of the game. We are sustainable. We are adhering to the standards and the development goals, the UN development goals, which my old company did, and you're ahead of the game on that. And you can introduce these even if you don't have them at the moment. So what we're looking at is the Inform of HR framework for this program is looking at, as we talked, the 4 main areas. And then we're going to do a lot of measuring and analyzing performance. It's going to be, and every single module is going to be related to having measures for each of these. What are the key performance measures? So you've got recruiting and talent, recruiting and retaining, designing and developing, and compensation and benefiting. So basically how this works is looking what's the issues, and we're going to be doing a lot of case study work on that. And then what are the activities? What do we do, and what's the best way of doing things? And then what's the output? What's the outcome? Not just measuring what we do, but measuring what we want to achieve. So there's going to be a strong focus on that, because I think in the past, metrics is very much about measuring what you do, which is okay, but you need to be measuring, are you achieving the outcomes? So, for example, issues recruiting, skills shortages, or whatever. The metrics are recruitment yields, budget allocation, investments, etc. And then what do you need to do once you've got the metrics? So maybe look at looking at your assessment of recruitment channels, the participants completed training, or the engagement surveys, or whatever. And that will give you an output. So better quality candidates, results in training delivery, so people are learning more and applying that, and greater participation rate. So qualities of hire increase, improvement in job performance, and employee engagement scores. I'm doing this very, very quickly, but you can have a copy of these slides. But this is showing you how we move from issue to metrics to activity to output to outcome, and it's the outcome that you want to achieve. Okay, each module is 2 days, and each of the 4 courses are made up of 2 modules each. There will be case studies in every one of them linked to real business situations in the region for each topic area. So it's going to be very, very practical. If anyone who's been on programs like mine, I make it practical. There's theory there, but the majority is going to be practical. And then there's going to be an assessment for each course. So for each course, there's 30 multiple choice questions, 15 for each module, of which then you would have to achieve a pass rate of 70%. If you don't achieve that, you can retake it. And this is very much to make sure how much knowledge has been retained. And for every module, so the 8 modules, there are going to be metrics specifically related, the sorts of leading metrics you'd expect to measure how well you're doing in that module, in terms of when you bring that into your organization, what metrics would follow. So those will be shared and discussed with you as well. Okay. And here's another thing, some of the content is not covered in other HR courses. So sustainability leadership and management, HR's role in sustainability, insurance fundamentals. You might think, oh, don't get involved in that or whatever. That's a key part where HR can have a big impact, both in making sure that employees are covered in various areas, but also managing costs as well. Reputation management, real important part to build your credibility in HR, and so that the senior management are going to be listening to you, and your influencing skill, we'll come on to influencing skills there, which is really important. Going to be covering systems thinking, so the way we look at problems and situations, okay? Data management and security, which is a key part now, particularly with the advent of AI, and also job negotiations, an interesting topic there of how we look at negotiations. We tend to often have the soup mentality, well, let's give them as little as possible, or how much we can get away. We're going to give you a different approach to dealing with that. Look at ethics and governance as well as legal principles. But also we're looking at HR in the government sector and the department of one. Many people have just themselves in HR because they're smaller businesses. We're going to talk about how you can make sustainable HR work within that environment and working with that. And I'll also then design thinking, agile management, which some of you may have worked about, but also the future of work and how that is changing and continually changing. And we'll also talk about HR maturity. Where are you on a maturity matrix and what you need to be doing to improve that? So how we're going to deliver it, a lot of it is, we're going to be lots of activities. It's not, as I'm doing now, standing here talking to you, there's going to be a lot of discussions, a lot of group discussions, a lot of activities, a lot of case studies in that. Very much on practical, not theory. There'll be elements of theory there, but it's practical. How do you take that and how do you apply it in your workplace? Case studies we talked about, real world case studies, not just in the region, but we'll have some global versions as well. And both Brad and myself have lived and worked in the Middle East for 20 plus years. So we're Middle East and the region, Africa and Asia. So we've lived abroad. So we're taking it more from not a Western input. We're taking from a universal HR program, because some of the things that happen in the region can also be adapted and applied to the way you do things. As you know, taking Western concepts and trying to apply them directly into Africa or the Middle East does not always work. Why? Because of culture. And culture eats strategy for breakfast, as you all know. Okay, so just summary then. It's going to be comprehensive because it covers a significant amount of content, all related to HR. It doesn't go into a deep dive in any area specialized, but will give you lots of guidance of where to go for more information, because there's a lot to cover. And it gives you a different perspective. We'll be looking at HR not from the theory perspective. We're looking at HR in the new world of the environment, the new area. How do we make HR sustainable over time for all stakeholders? And we'll, as I said, cover some topics that are not covered by other HR courses or qualifications. So it's basically suitable for fresh graduates, people transferring into HR, and people who are already in HR. I'm sure many of you have been on existing courses, whether in Inform or SHRM, CIPD or whatever. But this is an opportunity to learn. And the reason I've been in learning and development myself for the last 10 years in HR, God, I'm learning. I learn every day. And just working with Brad on this program, I've also learned as well. And a lot of it is applying to what I see happening in the world. So we've always got to take ourselves out of our comfort zone. And I regularly do that. And I can assure you, you'll be taken out of your comfort zone, because HR is in its comfort zone too much. And you need to be doing things differently. And that needs to change. And that is up to you. And part of what we're going to do is giving you confidence, give you a backbone to stand up for what you believe should be done that's right for all stakeholders over the long term. Okay, sorry, I've talked a fair bit there. How about some questions and answers? I think, May, there's some questions in the chat. Or
Yes, there are some questions here. So the most common question was, how do we make old management with conventional beliefs accept modern changes?
Get rid of them. Mas salama. No, it is difficult. And a lot of things, remember I talked about the concept of mental models. We're going to be taking some other concepts there and influencing skills, selling skills. We'll be bringing in selling skills. So you want someone to buy something that they're not really thinking about buying. So what you need to be doing is starting to understand your senior management in more detail. It is about understanding what are the pressure points. Anyone who sells. I mean, people will sell anything to anyone, and they're very good at doing it. So they want to understand their needs. So you need to understand your management, what their mental model is. They're old school or whatever. But within that, there are certain things that would appeal to them. And talking about things like community, the social side and whatever, within the context of that, will start to get people to think differently. It is not going to be easy, right? But particularly if you start highlighting, well, actually, we're working to this because it's ISO standards. We're working to it because it's the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're working to this because it's required by ESG. If we want to grow globally as a company, we've got to start adhering to these standards. So that is your call. Hold the picture up. Are we ready for this? Are you ready? Oh, no. Well, shouldn't we be getting there? So this is where using the standards could also make people think, but also using it in a way that's saying, yeah, I should be doing this, right? And getting them to think differently. I've been doing some work in the UK on well-being, and actually we've found that well-being programs don't necessarily work. Do you know why? Because you don't involve senior management. So what we've been doing is working with CEOs and senior management to discuss their own well-being. That's very powerful, because suddenly they realize, yeah, a lot of them don't have a great work-life balance, don't have a great family environment, pressures and whatever, mental health issues. But getting them to address that means that they will then say, hey, yeah, the rest should be doing this. So again, it's how you do it. And we will be taking you through various tools and techniques, selling techniques, influencing techniques, different models to help you to do that. And again, we want you to share the situations that you're in, because everyone's going to be different.
Okay, some people were asking about to share the presentations and to share with them the presentation and the recording of the webinar, and also some information about the certificate. So I believe we will be, after the webinar, we will be sharing the link of this recording and also the full information about the certificate. So also they asked about the link to the video that we played previously, and I shared this. So I believe that has been covered. Yeah. So someone asked, can you please share or discuss the again the rule, the new rule emerging?
Okay, I could take the next 50 minutes just talking about that. So there are new regulations coming in, global regulations that are often focused on the finance. So the IFRS regulations coming in January 2025 are very much linked to finance, but there are elements related to the way you look at and manage your people and account for those as well. So that's one particular example. The ESG and corporate governance. Already I showed you an example of a big investment house that's putting pressure on Amazon in terms of what they're doing. Okay, we will go into a lot of details here, but there's an element of that. The UN Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of organizations sign up to that and they use it as a banner. They have to adhere to them, they have to deliver to those, and they have to be regulated by them. And then they're able to use the banner, very much similar to the ISO. And we've got ISO standards and metrics to adhere to. And there's others as well coming on. So I haven't got time to go through it all here, but these are things you need to be aware of, and you need to be ahead of the game. Because I know you sort of finance saying, oh, by the way, we've got this this IFRS we've got to work to. Could you give me this? Because then they will be looking at that from a financial solely perspective. You need to look at it from a finance, a people, a community, and environment perspective as well. So you can add real value to that if you get your minds around it. And I think it depends on your organization which sort of regulations they tend to be following or adhering to. So again, you need to be talking to your senior management and get ahead of the game on that. But we'll be going to a lot more detail in parts of the courses on these various regulations.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. So another question was, how can HR leverage the UAE's focus on innovation and technology to drive sustainability initiatives within the organization?
Yeah, very much as the video showed. What are you doing? How is AI affecting you now or not affecting you? What can you do with that? Okay, and how can you use AI? AI has been brought into HR very, very quickly, but it's also the moral aspects of AI. And already we're aware of some of those, how AI can create a lot of fake information. So you've got to be ahead of the game. You've got to be there. IT will have the responsibility for AI, but you've got to be looking at that and saying, okay, we need to have some controls and measures on this to be a good employer, to be in line with the sustainable development goals of whatever, or the ISO standards. But also innovation is about thinking differently. In the past, maybe you've employed people and never anything else. So why do you employ people? Can you people part-time? Could you take them temporary workers? Can you take contract workers? Do you really need to employ people? Can you outsource it? again, making sure that it's sustainable what you're doing. You're not doing it just for financial reasons and creating an environment that's not a very nice place to work in, you know? So innovation is very much thinking of a problem and situation in HR and saying, you immediately fall back on, well, what does the textbook say? Wrong. The textbook gives you a guide. What you need to say is, how can I do this differently? How can I look at this differently? And one of the things I've enjoyed, particularly in my latter years in a corporate role, was dealing with these problems and issues. You go back to the fundamentals. Why are we doing this? What do we need to do? Can we do it differently? And thinking out of the box. And you know what? Innovation is about trying things. If you look at the Japanese, who are well known for it, you know, they would try things out 100, 200 times before they get what they want. So innovation doesn't just happen. You don't come up with the answer. And you need to have a team around you that will be able to think out of the box. When we were in Anderson, we had rooms that were all whiteboards. And we have a problem situation. We go in the room, no chairs. I say, right, throw things on the board. Crazy, you know, what I call diverse and converse thinking. Let's throw out all the possible solutions, as crazy as they are, and then let's focus on the key ones. That creates innovation. So again, we'll be giving you some tools and techniques to help you with that.
Perfect. Yeah, I believe that's all the questions for now. If anyone has any question, please just let us know. There, some people would like to talk. I am going to allow them to talk, to ask the question. Yeah.
Please.
So Gemma, I believe you raised your hand from the beginning of the of this webinar. If you would like to share your thought. Gemma?
Sorry, that was just to confirm that I could hear and see the slides.
Okay, no worries. So, yeah, I believe Nekhil, also, I'm going to allow you to talk if you have anything to share with us.
Thank you. Hi, Tom. It was indeed a wonderful session thus far. I had a question specifically because you're giving special thirst to sustainability HR. We do have in multinational corporates, big corporates, a separate department which takes care of corporate social responsibility. And we have dedicated resources working in that department to reach out to the employees, reach out to the communities, and do a representation between the two. How do you think that HR should play a role, because you already have an existing department and you have a separate skill set or experience or expertise? Or do you think the activities will overlap, or how will that intersection happens between these two departments?
No. A very good question. Here it's very much about not taking their work away or overlapping with them, but it's taking the principles of sustainability and what's happening with corporate social responsibility and applying those to the way we work in HR. So it's about taking those principles of sustainability over time, of making sure there's development, there's progress, there's enhancement and whatever, which is exactly what they're doing, but it's making sure you do that internally within the organization. So what I would say to you, go back to speak to corporate social responsibility people, understand what they're doing and say, are there anything that they're doing that you can apply within HR in how to make things sustainable? Because maybe there's been a disconnect. So do you have a lot of interaction with your CSR teams?
Okay, thank you, Tom.
No, the question is, do you have a lot of interaction with your CSR teams?
So CSR teams, basically, we're talking about my past employer, where they had a separate team. They used to run all the charitable, non-profitable activities for the communities, and at the same time to be highlighting that it's a great place to work. But HR had no involvement, absolutely no involvement.
Okay. This is where you need to get involved. You know, we've got to break down some of the barriers here. You know, that's corporate sort is over there. Actually, what they're doing externally is what you should be doing internally. And how can you apply that? Because, you know, a great place to work, that falls into HR. Why have they got it? So I think we need to relook at your relationship with corporate social responsibility if you have a separate unit. And I'm not saying merge it or whatever, I'm not saying that, but it's looking at sustainability HR in everything we do for people, for organizations, and see how that interacts with community, with which, and it's not all about it's not all about charities, but community. It's about, for example, how much recycling goes on, how much are people engaged with what needs to be done on the environment, the culture, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's taking the principles of CSR and applying it within HR and seeing that they're seamless. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Just in extension to the question, what I had. So I'm a part of the firm where we do HR services to our clients, and I have a team also attending to your session. What would be a recommendation? Because in the service line, we give special thirst to operations, strategic portions of HR. But if you would like to run some programs to our clients, what would be that program or initiative that can be bundled up to run this? Because you've given certain certifications or courses to be gone through. Without these, for a moment, what are the programs that you recommend or suggest us that we can think about, budget-wise and non-monetary-wise also? What that we
Sorry,
can do?
so are you talking about other programs other than what we're talking about here at Sustainable HR?
Yeah, initiatives, basically. If you want to run some initiatives, what would be a recommendation to adapt to the changing scenarios within the HR on sustainability model?
Okay, so first and foremost, you've got to challenge yourself. This is not about running courses. I think what I've done is I do a lot of coaching of HR people. And you need to look differently at how you do HR, fundamentally look differently how you do HR. And you've got to challenge yourself and you've got to say, how do we do things differently? And I don't think enough of that is done. And also, I don't think HR markets itself very well. You often do some good stuff and you know what? You keep it quiet because no one's complained. We need to be more broad out there. We need to be more adventurous. We need to take some risks. So it's not about courses, it's about looking fundamentally at your mental model of how you look at HR. And what this program will do is help you to think differently about all the aspects that you're doing, because each of the programs that will give you a perspective is going to be different to anything you've seen before. And that will help you to build your confidence. It also helps you to greater innovation and start looking at things differently. So again, there's no one-off answer. You've got to look in the mirror and say, what can I do differently? And how can I position that with the old crankety senior management, if it's applicable, or how do I position that with my CEO or whatever? So you've got to think differently. And there's elements of that across all the programs, as we say, because many of there's some great HR programs out there. They teach you the theory, but they don't teach you how to get that across, how to win people over, how to get people, management as well as employees engaged, how to position it, right? Often we're not very good at implementation. I know that, I've seen it. I've worked on that. It never works out the way you want it. We know why, because you're dealing with people and people are so unpredictable. Yeah, it's a challenge. So I'm not giving you an answer because I don't think there's one program that would do that. But fundamentally, it's about you and the rest of the people and the rest of the HR community around the world. You have to change. And I get frustrated that sometimes you're victims. Oh, this is not doing, I can't do that. No, don't be a victim. Go out there and start thinking differently about HR and what it can do. And what you can do to how then you influence, engage, and win people over to looking at HR differently.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
So we have a couple of questions. As a HR professional, how do you technically link organizational culture to HR?
Right, culture is it's always a good one. I did a lot of work on culture, but culture is really important. You've got to understand the culture. You've got to break down that culture is created over time. It's not something that happens overnight. And culture is often related back to the owners, the history, the physical things that you're going through, even how you greet people, how people talk in the office. It's everything. So that is very strong. And what HR needs to be saying, if we want to be sustainable, if we want to be a good employer, we might not have the right culture, right? That's going to be difficult to change, but you've got to start chipping away at that. So you come back. Change management is another area that we'll be covering through the program. So change management is understanding what sort of culture you want in the future. What will that do for all the stakeholders, the owners, the CEOs, the employees, the suppliers, the environment, the government, whatever, and start showing them a vision of what a new culture would be like. Critically, you need senior management involvement in that. HR cannot do it on their own, and don't do it on your own. You will fail. Categorically, you will fail. So understanding the culture, and I think often you've got to look at your culture in HR and saying, is this the right organization for me to be in? You know, you can't teach an elephant to sing. The elephant can't sing, and it makes the elephant angry and trying to teach him. Do you know what I mean? So I'm using that as an analogy, that sometimes you've got to try, but sometimes it's just not going to change because you have a culture that is not going to be where you want to take HR in the future. But you've got to try and work with them to get them to understand how the future can be different and what's in it for me. If you want people to change, you've got to answer the what's in it for me question. From the CEO, from the finance director, commercial director, managers, whatever, including employees. I haven't given you a particularly straight answer there because it's a difficult one. Changing culture is difficult, and HR needs to understand what their culture is and see how they can work within that. You know what? And if not, leave. Because you can't, you know, in HR, we're reliant on the support of senior management. And if after trying everything, it doesn't work, leave. I've done that before. Find an organization that's better suited to the principles of what you want to adhere to and the principles of good HR, sustainable HR.
Yeah. I believe we will need to take the final question, and any further questions that you would like to ask Tom, or to ask about the certification, or if you have any inquiries that you would like to reach Tom or anything, just please feel free to drop me an email. I just dropped my email address in the chat box, so just drop me an email with all of your inquiries. So the last question is, any recommendations to ease mental wellness to the traditional environment in the Middle East, where it's still a bit of taboo?
Yeah, I've thought of that. And one of the biggest things in any well-being globally, and I know there's regional variations, the one thing is communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate again. Talk to people. Get them to talk. I've been very lucky. I've worked with a number of people in the region in Africa, and it's interesting. Once you start talking, you build trust, and once you build trust, people will start to open. That's at an individual level. So yeah, it's about communication. And one thing I know about the region, when I look at Africa or the Middle East, people like to talk. You'll get into areas that they'll feel very uncomfortable about, but once you build that confidence, and it's creating a framework that will enable that, mental well-being is down to people who don't communicate. There's a big scheme going on at the moment here because increasing suicide to get people to talk. It'll take time, but you've got to reassure, you've got to build a trust, you've got to create frameworks to that, you've got to create maybe support mechanisms externally as well as internally. Don't try and do it all internally. A lot of external thing, and I think things are changing. It still has a way to go. It's a difficult one, but the one thing I found is communicate.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for this amazing and comprehensive webinar. It was really enjoyable. Like, I enjoyed my time, to be honest. So thank you so much, everyone who participated in this webinar, and looking forward to meet you again in the upcoming webinars and in our upcoming courses as well. Thank you.
Can I just leave you all with one thing that I want you to do?
Yep.
I want you to look at your mental model of how you look at HR and look at how you can change that. Because if you don't do that individually, no course, no whatever will help you. But if you're prepared to change, then programs like this and other programs will help you. You've got to change.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All the
Bye.
best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
What if you and your team can be even more? Even more informed, competitive, accomplished, even more successful, with programs designed to inspire and empower everyone to become even more. Introducing Informa Connect Academy. With hundreds of global, digital, and in-person training courses led by world-renowned industry experts, reimagining learning experiences for even more unlocked potential. Informa Connect Academy, available at informaconnect.com/academy.